Okay, so today we're going to learn about covenants. Covenants are real exciting. I'm going to show you how a covenant was made and what the pattern of covenants were back in the ancient Near East, so that we can kind of think like they thought. So it's a covenant. Okay. The word in Hebrew is berit. And so when they made a covenant, they made a berit. There are basically, well, first of all, let me show you that the Old Testament is basically, the word testament means covenant. So when your Bible, and you're looking at the Old Testament, you're looking at the big title for the Old Testament is called the Old Covenant. And the big title for the New Testament is called the New Covenant. So that's, the Testament and covenant means the same thing. So that's kind of interesting. In covenants, there's lots of different kinds of covenants in the ancient Near East. I'm going to try to take you back to 2,000 years BC, and let's think like they thought, and let's learn when someone said, I want to come and make a covenant with you, what did they expect, what did they think, how did that look like? So there was basically two kinds, might be more than that, but there's two kinds I'm going to show you. One is an equal party covenant. So like that's, one nation would say, you do this for me and I'll do this for you and we'll have a treaty. Okay, that's what we would call it today. If someone attacks this nation brings their military in to help. It's kind of like NATO. If Russia had gone in and attacked Poland, I think Poland's part of NATO, we would be at war. But they didn't. They attacked Ukraine, and Ukraine is not part of NATO, so we are not at war with Russia. But if they attacked England, then we would be at war because we are in treaty with England. So that's one kind of covenant. They looked at it, as we learned last week, that everything was family-oriented. So they called that kind of covenant a fictive kinship. That's a really weird name. I would have called it a fictitious kinship. That makes more sense to me, but that's what they called it. And that means that this nation is going to look at that nation like they're related. So we will treat them like they're related. Everything was based on who you're related to and all that. So this is called they will treat it like that. It's a fictive, it's like an equal party treaty. Okay, so that's one kind. And there's several things in the Bible. I will show you an example today of an equal party treaty and what happens because of that. There's another one called a suzerain vassal. Whoops, that's a Z. Suzerain. That's a different kind of treaty. Has anybody heard of those words before? Okay, so a suzerain is, I've read it in several different places now, is the dominant king, and the vassal is the lesser king. And in the Middle East back then, there were tons and tons of little kingdoms all over the place. We would call them city-states. You would go through the whole land of Canaan and you would find here, 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 here. So every time they mention a town like Lachish or any other town that you read of that's not Israelite, that's another little country in a town in a city with a wall usually. And that's a little city-state, has its own king, has its own army, I don't know how big that army is, maybe that army is 10,000 men, because that's all there is, but each one, and they're all over the place. So do you guys remember the big, massive empires that were in conflict? in the Middle East. We did this, I think, a few weeks ago. There's the, I didn't bring the map. There's the Egyptian. Wait, let me do it backwards. Egypt's down here. It's a huge, major kingship, rulership, empire type thing that is always dealing with Israel. And then there's another one over here in the Fertile Crescent, and that is Assyria. Eventually Babylon will come in, but for the longest time in the story, it's Assyria comes down, Egypt comes up. Assyria comes down, Egypt comes up, and Israel is caught in the middle. And at any given time, Israel has to deal with Assyria, or Israel has to deal with Egypt. Later on, Assyria will fail, and Babylon will come up over the Fertile Crescent and capture Assyria. And at that time, Egypt gets real scared, and they come up to try to help Assyria defeat Babylon. Both Egypt and Assyria lose, and Babylon takes over. So that's kind of the big movement going on. And in the meantime, all these little nations are making these kind of treaties with either Egypt or Assyria. And it goes on like that. And so they're fighting, they're going back and forth trying to figure out who's our protection. The reason I'm telling you this is that the stories, as the storyline of the Old Testament goes, there's all this politics going on. And who's connected with who, and who's connected with who, and who's mad at who because they're connected with who, okay? That's going to go on all over the place. But I want to tell you how these work. If you go into this treaty, then you have, this guy is the main king, and his kingdom, and this guy is the lesser king, and his kingdom. And he makes the rules, and these guys obey. And as long as they obey, he protects. Got that? As soon as they disobey, he attacks.
So but you're talking about when they've already been conquered, basically. So it's the invading king is the main king.
It's actually what they will do. So let me go on. There's in ancient Near East archaeology, they have found all kinds of these treaties, so that they have a pattern. Like, and I don't read all these different languages, so I have to go by someone's explanation of it, but they have all these patterns and they mostly follow the same pattern. So what it is a king is going to say, is going to come in and say, all right, I want the produce of this kingdom. I would like their tributes, I would like their grain, I would like their stuff. So I'm bigger and more powerful, so I'm going to come in and make a deal with them. I will not attack you, you guys pay tribute to me. That's how that goes. So sometimes they haven't already attacked, but that's the plan there. And so, let's see where I'm getting my train of thought here. This one pays tribute and loyalty to this one. So they would go, that one, and this one provides protection to this one. Okay, that's sort of the plan on that. This guy usually lets this king run his kingdom however they want. They get to keep their own local gods. They get to have their own traditions and do whatever they do, as long as they pay their tribute and they stay loyal to him. Right? As soon as one of these kings picks a different one, like let's say, okay, this was Assyria, I'm going to go check out Egypt. That's considered treason. And he now has authority in his mind, according to this contract, to come in and conquer. All right, and he will. And lots of times as our Old Testament goes along, we're going to have Assyria coming down and attacking like crazy, or different countries that are in power at the time. And that's what's going on behind the scenes as God works out his story. So that's important to know. They assume that they own that guy's land. They assume that. And so if I own your land, I'm going to let you work on your land and you're going to pay me tribute. You stop doing that and I'm going to take your land back. That's what happens. Okay? So this is the one we're talking about most. There's, if they would forfeit their land. Okay, so there's two other concepts I want to teach you today, and that is the concept of an unconditional covenant and the concept of a conditional covenant. In this set, this is really how God deals with covenants. More so, this is how the people dealt with covenants. This is the culture of the time. God's going to have conditional covenants and unconditional covenants. An unconditional covenant is when there's two parties and this one promises stuff to that one and this one just sits there and gets it. Okay? If this one promises, I'm going to do this for you, and there is no conditions attached, then this one does it for that one and just sits there. However, there's also other kinds where this one, where it kind of goes like this. I will do this for you, and you will do this for me. And if either of them break it, then we have a problem. So when it's God and Israel, you know God's not going to break it, because that's in his character. So only Israel can break the covenant. God cannot break the covenant, because that's in his character to not break the covenant. So that's conditional and unconditional. Okay, so that's sort of my definition of terms. I'm really excited to teach you this because when I learned it, I thought, that whole Old Testament makes sense to me. So this is going to define how the storyline goes from here on all the way to Malachi. And so I'm just like, been chafing at the bit since last week. So. Okay, so the form of a berit. Okay, there's two main ones. There's two main secular ones that come to countries that had lots and lots of evidence of covenants made that were this style, the suzerain vassal style. And one is the Hittites, and one is the Assyrians. And in the Hittites, predominantly lived from 2000 BC to 1000 BC. That's when their dominance was. And the Assyrians are from 1000 BC to the time they get destroyed at 630 BC or something like that. Okay? So you have these two kinds. And they're a little different. So just to let you know, when God makes a covenant with Israel, like at Mount Sinai, it's in this time frame. Because it's before 1000. So it's in this time frame. So I'm telling you these two patterns so you can see what's going to happen. Okay, so the first thing is you have a preamble. If you're going to make a covenant, this is what they do. Whoops. Can't spell on the whiteboard. I can't spell very well anyway, but I can't spell on the whiteboard even more. The preamble is where the dominant king goes to the other one and says, this is who I am. I am the great and mighty king. I have, I don't know, you name it, I am like most powerful. I am the one who controls all the land. This is who I am. He gives all his names and titles of who he is. I am the father of da-da-da-da-da, the grandson of da-da-da-da-da. I am the great and mighty king. So he gives all his titles as who he is. So that's sort of like, okay, that's what we're dealing with, right? And the second part, that's his titles.
Would that be like authority, the authority he has
Yeah,
to do?
he is placing himself, he is putting himself in a position of, you need to listen to me because this is who I am. It would be like, the President of the United States walks in, and whether we like him or not, we would listen. He is the President of the United States. He deserves some respect. Okay? That's what's being presented there. That help, Minnie?
That's the deal.
Yeah. All right. That might be true, but I'm saying by position. The second thing he is, and this is in a Hittite, I'm going to give you a Hittite pattern. Second thing he's going to do is he is going to do the historical prologue. And this, in a Hittite pattern, is going to list the things that he has already done that benefits the vassal. Okay? He would say such like, I am the one who protected you from the invading whatevers. Okay? So they have, and this gives them, this is important because this gives the vassal a reason for entering the treaty, right? Enter I-N-G. All right. So this gives the vassal the reason, because he goes, this is what I've already done, and this is what I've already done for you, and now you have reasons to enter into this treaty for me, with me. The next part of it would have been the stipulations. All right, that's what the vassal has to do. You have to bring me 20% of your produce every year. You have to provide me passage through your land because I'm going to be attacking other people and I need free passage through the land. There's no objections from you guys. I need housing for my men when I come through. I need food. You need to feed my army as I come through. If I have to come through, we will not attack you. We're just going through. You will pay us so much gold and silver every year. Da 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 da. So here's the stipulations of the covenant, okay? And then there's a point where the vassal gets to agree or not agree. At the time, if you really paid attention to the politics at the time, to not agree was risky. I'm just saying, you had to You got to agree or not agree, but to not agree was probably risky. You had to be able to defend yourself because things like that. So you have this agreement or not. Oh, I put that as number 4. Excuse me. Agree or not agree. So once they agreed, they would call it, they would make a copy. They would make 2 copies. So you have witnesses. There usually was 2 witnesses and they made 2 copies of the covenant. One copy, after it has the witnesses, goes into the temple of the god of the suzerain. The other copy goes into the temple of the god of the vassal. Okay, so they kept it there. That's where the treaties were kept. And the 2 witnesses were the god of whoever the god was, like if it was Moloch or if it was whoever was they're all false gods. Whoever was the god of the suzerain, they did stuff that made him be the witness, and whoever was the god of the vassal had him as the witness.
Not human.
No, we're talking, they're false gods, whoever they're worshiping, but that's who they thought were real, and I'm trying to tell you the thinking of the people at the time, okay? Because Israel grows up in this time, and Israel is a non-nation group at this time. They are slaves at this time, and they don't have a system of authority. Within themselves, they don't have a plan of laws. They don't have anything. They don't have military training. They don't have education. They are slaves. They are slaves for generations.
So did the vassals have any stipulations for the suzerains?
No, the vassal did not. The only thing the vassal could do was to not agree. And then you had to deal with whatever that consequences of that was. Yes. If the Hittite pattern at least had some positive here. Okay, so there was at least something here that was beneficial to these guys, to the vassal. So there was a little bit there, and I did not study all these other treaties to find out exactly what those things were and whatnot. I did have little excerpts of some that I'll tell you as we get there, okay? So they have this, and this validates. This is the validation. This is like signing the treaty, okay? So this is your validation that it's in effect. Generally, they were in effect for indefinitely. Like, this will be for you and your sons and your grandsons and your grandsons and your grandsons. And they are to be loyal. That's the big, big thing. They are to be loyal to their suzerain. As a matter of fact, the word is hesed. You guys know that word? That's the word. It means they are to love their suzerain. They are to treat their suzerain as, we love you, we want you. They are to be loyal to death. That's the plan here. These guys, because they've already started off with a positive, I'm going to do this for you, have some of this towards them too, although I can't verify how much of that was there. I also can't verify how much of this was there. That's just the idea of it all. All right, and then after, they had also a time where they had periodic readings, like
State of the Union.
yeah. Yes, like that, periodic readings, where they would get everybody together, they'd have some kind of festival, and they would read the covenant, and everybody would be, and this is how the next generation learns the covenant. So there's all these periodic readings. How often they came was part of the stipulations, and depending on who was the suzerain at that time and who was the vassal at that time. Okay, so, and then there was a ratification ceremony. Okay, ratification ceremony is really unique. They would take whatever animals were appropriate for sacrifice. They would cut up these animals. They would put half on this side, half on this side, and they would make the vassal walk through the middle. And as they walked through the middle, someone with an announcement or a megaphone or whatever they could do back then, would say, "This is not the head of a lamb. This is so-and-so, your king's head, should he break this covenant." This is not the shoulder of the lamb. This is the shoulder of you and your sons and your grandsons and your great-grandsons should you break the covenant. So by walking through, you say, what just happened to them will happen to me if I break this covenant. Does anybody recognize that?
Yes, yeah.
Where have you read that?
Moses.
Abraham. Yes. Okay. So that's how that goes. After they have that, they roast it all. They have a big, huge celebration feast, and everybody eats and has a great time. And it's a big old party or whatnot, right? And we now have a ratified covenant. So, knowing that. Now, if it was that's if it's a Hittite pattern. If it's a Assyrian pattern, they take out this. And they don't put any historical prologue in there. They have an assumption of terror and brutality and just horrid. And if you ever go through Assyrian history, what they did to their POWs, or what they did to people they conquered, is absolutely gross, gut-wrenching, horrid. It's just horrid. Physically, the torture was probably beyond anything that happened in World War II, either between the Japanese or between the Germans, or even in the Holocaust. So it's that horrid. And that's what their reason for joining the treaty was. You do not want this to happen to you. We will do that to you. So when the Assyrians attack, and they will, this is big time serious stuff. So if you were sitting in northern Israel during the end of their time, and the Assyrians are coming in, that is huge. I don't even know how you live in. Yes, I just don't even know how you live now. So I was going to give you some examples. In Joshua 9, there's an example of both kinds of treaties, both the Equal Party Treaty and the Berit Treaty. And what happens is, and I'm going to sort of jump around the timeline again today to give you examples of these treaties so that you get a clue. So in Joshua, he is conquering the land. He's already conquered Jericho. He's already conquered the next one, which is Ai. And it turns out that on the pattern, there's an actual military strategy planned. He's doing it backwards. If here's the Jordan River and here's the Med, Joshua's coming in like this. Their plan is to cut through the center. They conquer through the center, conquer the and create a supply line. Okay, that's a military thing. Create a supply line, and then they're going to go south and conquer that group, and then they're going to go north and conquer that group. And that's the big overall plan for conquering the nation, conquering the land. So as they go through, they have Jericho, they have Ai, and oh my goodness, who's next on the list? It's a place called Gibeon. The Gibeonites happen to be a pretty good sized, strong little city-state. And they have entered into an equal party treaty with several others in the south. It's 5 others, so it's a total of 6. But they look at Israel coming in, so that's their equal party treaty, all right? So they are fictive kinship with those guys. They look at Joshua coming in and they go, oh my goodness, we're going to lose to this. So they break treaty here, and they want to make a treaty with Israel. Well, they know something. Israel's been commanded by their suzerain, which I will get to in a minute, who is their God, not to make any treaties with people of the land. So, what are we going to do? We are going to pretend like we're not part of the land, and so they are only like 6 miles away. That's how close they are. They are the next ones on the list. They are like 6 miles away, and they put on old, worn-out clothes, and they have moldy old bread and dried up wineskins with no water, and they're all broken. And they do this trip around, and they come in from this side, and they come up to Joshua, and they say, oh, you know, and they pretend like they're, I don't know, from Iraq, I don't know, you know, Iran. They're very, very far away. They go, oh, we've heard that all this about, and when they're very careful, they talk about what happened in Egypt. So that's 40 years ago. And they talk about what happened outside the Jordan River on the east side when they conquered Sihon and God, I think that's the name. And but they don't talk about Jericho or Ai because that's recent and they wouldn't have known. So they come in like that and they do this big thing, and the people are going, we're not supposed to make treaties with anybody in the land. They go, oh, we're not from the land, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? So they end up making a suzerain vassal treaty with the Gibeonites. And afterwards it says, and Joshua, it's the one time I can find a failure on Joshua's part, he did not ask the counsel of the Lord. It actually says that in the verse. He did not ask the counsel of the Lord. So they make the treaty, they're a little worried about it, but they go ahead and make the treaty, and because they're not part of the land, and then the Gibeonites go home, right? All right, guess what happens? The previous treaty finds out that the Gibeonites are traitors to their fictive kinship treaty. And so they don't attack Israel, they attack Gibeon. So now you've got 5 other kings in a conglomeration with all their armies coming in to attack this one. And Gibeon has a fair army, but they immediately send out a messenger to Joshua, their suzerain, and says, oh, we're being attacked, you have to come protect us. I mean, we're talking probably a week, maybe, because this did not go over well with the other city-states, right? So Joshua, they have to, you guys know this story, they have to hike, it's an uphill hike for 6 miles, and they have to hike all through the night, and then fight all through the day. So they have to come rescue their vassal who they weren't supposed to make a treaty with. But Joshua is faithful, and he does come rescue his vassal. And in the midst of this, they have agreed to be Israel's slaves. That's part of this agreement. They actually say that. We will serve you. That was in the stipulations. And it's the Gibeonites who come up with that. We will serve you, you protect. And what they're really saying is, we don't care if we're slaves for the rest of our lives, just don't kill us. That's what they're really saying, but they can't come out and say that because that would let them know where they really live. So when the messenger arrives, Joshua and all the people of Israel realize, what did we do? And that's when they find out they should have gone and talked to the Lord. Well then, according to honor, they have to go protect them. So they do. And when Joshua makes them slaves, he does the really super, super wise thing. He says, okay, so they win the battle gets bigger than this, the battle's full of all kinds of really cool stuff. I don't want to give away the story because we will get there. But when the whole thing is over and the battle's won and the other guys are all defeated, which basically conquers the south at the same time, he makes the Gibeonites slaves like they agreed. He said, this is going to be your job of slavery. You are going to be the cutters of wood and the haulers of water. Hauling water. Haulers of water. And he says, and you're going to do that for the temple of our God. So he brings these Gibeonites in, and their slavery is inside the tabernacle. So who do they get introduced to constantly? So does God cause all things to work together for good? The Gibeonites are brought into the story. If you go way, way, way up into the story and you get all the way to Ezra, and they're reestablishing the land, I could not find it in the Bible that actually said the Gibeonites are the servants, but almost everybody I read on it went through their names and they go, okay, those are the descendants of the Gibeonites that are still the servants in the tabernacle, in the temple. Way, 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 way. That's after the exile and everything. So all the way through. There was one time when King Saul decides he's going to kill the Gibeonites, and he has to pay for it mightily because he should not have done that. So that's the story of one example of a treaty like this. There's another example in Jeremiah. This one doesn't come out so nice. At the end, that we're talking, if you think of your timeline and Assyria is already gone, Babylon has come in, and the current king at the time is Jehoiakim. And Jehoiakim is a son of Josiah. You guys remember Josiah? He's the good king that brought back in the whole worship of God, got rid of the idols, brought back in the Passover after what? 200 years or something like that. Yeah. He's the son of this guy, and he was around during his dad's rulership, but he is very, very not a follower of God. So Jehoiakim has made, by now Babylon has come down. Let's do it this way. I've got my map backwards. Babylon has come down, and Israel had made a suzerain vassal agreement with Assyria. Prior to that, Assyria is losing, so Egypt comes up to save Assyria, and in the meantime, he makes a treaty with Egypt. So now he's traded Assyria for Egypt. When they come up and they reach Babylon, that's the Battle of Carchemish, and they lose. King Josiah dies. Anyway, this is all sort of the background. So we've changed suzerains, which is not allowed. And then, as that comes in, this guy, Jehoiakim, decides he's going to make a vassal suzerain agreement with Babylon. So Babylon's down there, and this is all fine until he decides to rebel against that. And then they surround the city. This is really, really overview because this happens in 3 main stages and 3 main deportations of people to Babylon and all this. So I'm really overdoing, simplifying it. Anyway, so while we're in the last 3 years of Jerusalem's history before the exile, okay, it's going to get destroyed. We're in the last 3 years, and they are surrounded, they are under siege, and they are starving. Okay, so Jeremiah sends King Jehoiakim a book that he has written that restates the covenant with God. And he doesn't break the covenant, like taking the tablets and breaking the covenant. He throws it in the fire. So he destroys that covenant. Okay, this is not good. And in the meantime, then a little bit time goes by and he goes, I think if I obey some of that covenant, then God will protect us from this army surrounding us. So what he does, and one of the rules of the Mosaic covenant was every 6 years, you let your Jewish slaves go free. So like if you lived in that country, if you lived in Israel back then and you couldn't pay your debts, you could sell yourself into slavery for 6 years. It's kind of like saying, I will take the job and work for you for 6 years, and I'm committed for 6 years. And on the 7th year, you get to go free. Okay, it's called being conscribed into slavery for 7 years or 6 years. So they had not, in Jerusalem, they had not set their Jewish slaves free. So if you ever want to read that, so they restate this covenant, and they take some animals and they put them on each side, and the owners of the slaves walk through the animals and say, we will set you free. Okay, so they finished their ceremony. They walked through the cut up pieces and they set the slaves free. Well, in the meantime, Egypt has come up and has distracted Babylon. So Babylon has to leave the siege and goes down to Egypt to fight them off. So Jerusalem has a little bit of freedom here, right? They can go get some food. They immediately re-slave their slaves. And God says, nope, not going to work. So that was kind of like one of the, I'm just showing you an example of, you don't get the whole list on that story, but you do get the ratification ceremony, so you know that this has gone on. Right? So I'm just giving you some examples of this in the Bible. The outcome of that decision was not pretty. Just saying it wasn't pretty.
Just tell me so I'll know.
Just tell you so you know.
Yeah, what happened?
Within the next year, Jerusalem falls.
Oh, okay.
The people virtually, literally starve. What happens when people starve is very horrific. The glory leaves the temple.
Because they broke the
Well,
agreement.
because that and along with all the other things too. But there's a point where there's a final straw maybe, you know, but they actually made this covenant. But then King Jehoiakim threw the book of Jeremiah into the fire. That wasn't a good idea either. Yeah.
Isn't one of the points, though, that covenant is a covenant is a covenant, and you cannot.
Cannot break covenant.
That was what one of God's points was. I think.
Yes.
So-
I think the whole reason we got this little tidbit of a covenant with the slaves part of it is to show exactly that.
Yeah.
You make a covenant, you stick with the covenant.
And God will get you if you don't.
Yeah, that's
Because that's what happened. The consequences were not good.
yes,
You don't
Right.
disobey that covenant.
you don't disobey that covenant. So there's another one. And this one is a really neat one. This is in Genesis 15. And this is the one with Abraham. I think I mentioned it already. And so in Genesis 12, well, I'm not going to tell you the whole story of Abraham too much. That's next week. I'm just trying to isolate the covenants. So, but in Genesis 12, God he initiates a covenant with Abraham. And this is an unconditional covenant, okay? So he says, Abraham, I want to make you a great nation. I want to give you the land. There's 3 parts to this covenant. I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to give you the land of Canaan, and all the families of the world will be blessed through you. So that's the covenant, all right? In order for Abraham won't see any of it except for the very beginning of making the great nation, which means he has to have a kid. Otherwise, he can't turn into a nation. Because this isn't spiritual, abstract. This is physical, real space and time, okay? So, 10 years goes by. And Abraham is in the land. He's a sojourner in the land. When he's living in his Bet Og, it's tents. It's not a building because they travel. So he's there. And 10 years goes by and he goes, well, God, I really do believe. And he did, because it said Abraham believed and it was credited to him as righteousness. That's 15:6. And you see, Abraham had to believe without any evidence. And I think that his faith was beyond almost anything we have today, because we have Bible evidence, we have story evidence, we have archaeological evidence. We have things to prove to us that this story is true. Abraham has God saying it. He has no Bible. He has no land. There's no archaeology on it. There's no other person to talk to. He has to do it just like that. So when he questions and says, God, I don't get how this is going to happen, I don't look down on him for that, because 10 years has gone by. And God says, okay, let me show you how strong this promise is. So you get this weird story. You get this weird story where God tells Abraham to go get a bunch of animals. This kind, they're 3 years old, this one, these 2 birds, whatnot, and it's like very specific. It's like on the ratification ceremony, it would be like, these are the exact animals that both parties agree with, all right? And then he says, cut the animals and put them on this side and on this side. And then it gets really dark. And Abraham goes into a deep, deep sleep. Kind of like Adam went to sleep. And then God shows up with a furnace and a torch. And I thought, a furnace and a torch. So this is one of those times like, okay, really, God? Just please explain to me the furnace and the torch. And he didn't right away. I'm just going to say, quite some time went by. I asked that question before I agreed to teach the class, Martha. And I said, I got to know about the furnace and the torch. But he did finally, and as I'm looking ahead, when I see Mount Sinai, it's covered with the smoke like a furnace and the fire like a torch. And I said, oh. It's the smoke and the fire, and it's down at the end of the row, and Abraham's seeing it, but he's in a deep sleep. And then it's not the vassal who walks through. It's the suzerain who walks through. So in Hebrews it says, let me read that. They're retelling this whole story. Basically, God is saying, if I don't keep this covenant, first of all he had to say is, I will do it, and that's good enough, it's God. Okay? Then he shows Abraham, if I don't keep this covenant, may what happened to those animals happen to me. In other words, I will stop being God. I will be completely destroyed as God if I don't do this for you. Can you imagine getting a promise like that? Yeah, so look here. Go to Hebrews chapter 6. Verse 13. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself. See, he can't swear by someone higher than him. He has to swear by himself, okay? Surely I will bless you, and I will multiply you. And so having patiently waited, he, Abraham, received the promise. For men swear by one greater than themselves, but with them an oath given as confirmation is the end of every dispute. He's referring back to a covenant. In the same way, God desired even more to show the heirs of the promise the unchangeableness of his purpose. So he interposed with an oath, so that by 2 unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have taken refuge would have strong encouragement to take hold of this hope which is set before us, which is an anchor for your soul. And that just blew me away. It's like God gave that to us. And all those times when you think, life gets hard and you go, where are you, God? When are you going to answer my prayers? How is this happening? How am I going to deal with this? I was listening to R.C. Sproul one time. Anybody heard of him? Okay, sometimes, most of the time I like everything he says. I'm just going to have this disclaimer. I'm not on board with every last thing he says. But one person asked him one time, what is your favorite verse? And he quoted, and God stood there with a torch and a burning oven. And everybody said, why on earth is that your favorite verse? And I said the same thing. And I'm beginning to understand. That is God putting his own self completely on the line to keep a promise to me. Best friend you could ever have, huh? Okay, so there's more on that, but we will deal with that when we get to the storyline of Abraham. So let's take a little break. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead in the story to Exodus 19, and we're going to go over how God set up this covenant with Israel. This one, by the way, is a conditional covenant. And the people have been brought out of Egypt. Moses has already done, God has already done the 10 plagues thing. Passover's already happened. They've crossed the Red Sea. They've already dealt with manna. They've already had water from the rock. They've already been attacked by Amalek, and Moses held his hands up. This is all backstory. And they are now at the foot of Mount Sinai. And this is what's happening right now. God, he has this group of people. The estimation is about 2 million. And that's if you count women and children. There's about 2 million. And they are just a mass of people without an organizational system. I mean, they are in their tribes and they have tribal leaders, but they don't have a constitution. They're not set up as a nation yet. They're just, and their background is just slavery. They don't have military training. They don't have education. They don't have all the stuff that happens in normal society when you're not a slave. They are just slaves. So at this point, there's probably all kinds of messing around, figuring out who's got rank, who doesn't have rank, because all of a sudden they've got all this freedom, right? So you can just see there's probably tension around, and God's purpose for setting up this covenant is to establish a nation. And how does that nation function? And how is it going to function as a nation within these other nations? And that nation, Israel's nation, God needs a suzerain. They need a protective leader over the top of them. And that's God, and he's going to be their God, okay? And when they set that up, in their thinking, in our thinking, we wouldn't have thought that, we wouldn't have gone there immediately, because we don't think in those terms. But we do have a nation, and we do have an army that protects our nation, and we, in theory, have border control, and we have an economic system, and we have laws, and we have police, and and if there's a fire, we have an organizational system to deal with stuff. They don't have anything yet. And here's Moses trying to control 2 million people. I do not envy him the job. And I think it's a terrifying job. So they're at the foot of the mountain, and in chapter 19, God is going to, of Exodus, we're in Exodus chapter 19, he is going to make an offer to the people of Israel, to the group, big group down there at the foot of Mount Sinai. And it's in the 3rd month after they've left. And Moses goes, and they're camped down there, and they're in the wilderness. And verse 3, Moses went up this mountain to talk to God, and God says, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the sons of Israel." And first thing he's going to say is, well, first of all, just the very fact that God is talking, and he's talking to Moses, is right here. Okay, we're going to get, this particular covenant isn't always in exactly the right order. This is God's order. So if I have to move things around a little bit, but we're going to have all these parts. And God is talking, and he's going to start his historical prologue with this. We're going to start with this one right here. Okay? And he's going to say, You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. That is his historical program. I have rescued you. I have redeemed you. I saved you from the Egyptians. I brought you out of slavery. You are safe over here. I've already protected you from the Amalekites that attacked to destroy you. I've already fed you with manna and quail in the evening, and you've got abundant water. I opened the Red Sea. I destroyed your enemy. This is who I am. Okay? Then here's his projected deal. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the sons of Israel. So Moses gets the initial offer of a contract. All right? So Moses goes down to the people and he tells that to the people, and he goes, hey, God wants to be our suzerain. Are you guys interested? And they say, so Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, yes, all that the Lord has said we will do. And Moses then is thrilled. He takes the good news, he goes back up the mountain, he says, yes, they say yes. And so God says, okay, go down and tell them to prepare for the covenant, what do you call it? The meeting, the big covenant meeting. We're going to have our big meeting, we're going to make our covenant, we're going to go through all the stipulations, you get to agree, we're going to have our witnesses, we're going to have our ratification ceremony, we're going to do the whole thing, okay? So they go down, they have to clean, they have to get very clean on the outside. It's the whole picture of being clean on the inside. It's the whole thing going on. And besides that, they've been traveling in the wilderness for 3 months. They might need to take a bath and wash their clothes. So they have that. So he goes down there and he tells Moses, I'm going to come in a cloud and you can't let the people touch the mountain, da-da-da-da-da. And they go all the way down and they get this all solved. Okay, go to chapter 20. So the day comes, and God, it's going to come out that they're going to see the fire on the mountain. They're going to see the big cloud. They're going to see the smoke. The earth is going to quake because God has come down on Sinai. The earth is going to quake. It's going to just like and then there's a trumpet, like a call to order. And the trumpet gets louder and louder and louder. And he brings the people around and they're all standing there and they're starting, I mean, this is, whoa, this is a little bit intimidating, and this is one big suzerain up there and, and that's how they're thinking because they have come from 400 years in a polytheistic society. All right? So yes, they do know there's one true God, but it's really hard for them to not add the other gods in. They have lived for all these years in a polytheistic society, generation after generation after generation. It's really hard to wrap your mind around just one. So God is going to make himself very strong in their eyes, and he needs to. Okay? He needs to put the fear of God into their eyes. And that's what he's doing. So this hit me, because I've read this over and over again, didn't dawn on me that, until recently, that when God said the 10 Commandments, he said them out loud to the people.
Ooh, wow.
He said, okay, this is God. I'm not God, but I am the Lord your God. There's your preamble. Who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. There's your historical prologue. And there's your motivation for entering into this covenant. Can you imagine hearing God's voice after you are looking at that mountain shake, and you know you can't touch that mountain because if you do, you'll die. And it's terrifying. Okay. And what does he say is his first stipulation? No other suzerains. You get it? No other ones. No other gods. Not at all. I don't care how you do. And then he goes into all this detail. You can't make an idol into a god. You can't make a wooden one into a god. You can't make a gold one into a god. You can't make it an animal. You can't make it a fish. You can't make it a bird. You can't make it anything. He goes through all the arguments. Well, what if we did it this way? No, you can't do it that way. Well, how about just this little one over here? No, you can't do it that way. None. Okay? No other suzerains, period. And then you know when he goes through the rest of the stipulations of the Ten Commandments, all right? So, jump down to verse 18. All the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, and when they saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. Well, no kidding. I can hardly even read it without standing at a distance. And they said to Moses, you need to speak to us and not God, because we can't hear that. Okay, so right now, in the middle of our thing, we have this big interruption going on. They're stopping the ceremony for a minute, and they're saying, wait. You go talk to God and then tell us what he says, because we cannot handle this. All right, so they are asking Moses to be an intercessor. This is the introduction of that concept. And so from here on in, God speaks to Moses, and Moses speaks to the people. See that? This is the concept of that. This is going to be a big picture of Jesus later on. All right? Between the holiness of God, which is terrifying in its perfection, and us stands an intermediary, and that's Jesus. And Moses is the picture of that. That's why he's going to say later, you guys have heard this, there will come a prophet like me later. Mm-hmm. And this also institutes the whole concept of prophet. In the rest of the Old Testament. From here on in, God will speak to the prophet, and the prophet will speak to the people. There's three main positions in God's running of the Old Testament. There's prophet, priest, and king. Prophet stands at the top. The priest's job is to take the people and speak to God. Okay, so he's to represent the people before God. That's why the priest does the sacrifices. That's why when the people sin, the priest goes and he takes the blood of the sacrifice and he goes in and says, "Here, God, please forgive their sins." That's the priest's job. The prophet's job is to listen to God and give the message to the people. So if you want to rank them, king comes third. King's job is to just sort of run the nation. The political, that's not a good term, but you understand, he's going to run the nation. He's going to make sure that water is available. He's going to make sure that the army is fed. He's going to, that kind of stuff, his job. And we'll find out later on that in one of the stipulations of God's law is that this king has to read this covenant, has to take and write out this covenant for himself. Each king, every king in the nation of Israel is to take this covenant, make his own handwritten copy in front of a scribe to make sure it's accurate, and then to read it periodically for himself.
So the Ten Commandments, basically.
Pardon me?
The covenant you're saying is the Ten Commandments God gave
Yes.
Moses. And so the rewriting
Yes.
is of that same.
But that king's job particularly is to write a copy of it himself and read it himself every single time, which makes you wonder why so many of them, like Josiah hadn't even seen the copy until he found it. What was the king before him doing? They weren't doing it. They weren't doing it. They weren't doing it. They weren't doing it. Okay? So this was the rule of the king when he goes, and it's set up in the covenant. It's, I'll show you where in a little bit. But they had to, the king's job, so the king is not the highest ranking in the thing. God is it runs in that order. The king has to listen to the prophet. You see that really clearly with Hezekiah. Hezekiah goes and prays to God, please don't let the Assyrians destroy us. We'll get there. And God sends the answer through Isaiah. Isaiah comes and says to the king, Hezekiah says, God has heard your prayer, because Isaiah speaks for God. God does not talk to them directly after that. And here's where it started. So this is a big piece of the puzzle as we go through the Old Testament. Why is it happening like this? So that's that. And it also gives a whole lot of rank for those books called the prophets.
Yeah.
The major prophets, the minor prophets, why are they there? What is their job? Yeah. So, Moses does this. He sets this up. Let me sure I got this all going right here. And Moses said to the people, don't be afraid. God is doing this to test you so that you will develop the fear of God. Well, for this day, it worked. I say that with a caveat. On this day, they had great fear of God. And so then I kind of I got all off, and now I got lost here. So anyway, so that stops the ceremony for the time. And Moses leaves them. He goes up on the mountain, and he gets the details of the rest of chapters 21, chapter 20, chapter 21, chapter 22, and chapter 23. And by the time we get to the end of chapter 23, that he's ready to come down. He's got God has made 2 copies. This is a theory I heard, that those 2 tablets are not rules 1 through 5 on this one. I don't know if this is true. I'm just giving you a theory I heard. Rules kind of make sense. Rules 1 through 5 on this one and 6 through 10 on this one. What this other person thinks is, since it's written on both sides, it tells us that it's written on both sides, and if you've read all the other ones of that era in secular time in that era, they could easily put the whole covenant on 1 tablet. So what he's thinking is there's 2 tablets to follow the tradition. And one is, quote, God's tablet, and one is, quote, the people's tablet. When they get to the point where they put one in each God's temple, there's only one God and there's only one temple, so they have to put both copies into one place. That makes sense to me. I can't find that specifically here, but that seemed logical to me. So anyway, God has this, the tablets are ready, and his witnesses are heaven and earth. You wait and see, I'll show you that. And Moses comes back down, and God says, you better get down there, because the people have already broken the covenant. And so less than 40 days goes by because there's got to be time for them to realize Moses is missing. And they don't know what happened to him. So, and Moses says, and right then, God says, I will destroy those people because they've broken the covenant. Now, I used to think, God, why would you say that? But now I understand. He is communicating in the way the people of that time would understand, because that was what happened when a suzerain vassal covenant was broken. And Moses goes, no, he does his intercession thing. No, you've got to forgive them, da-da-da-da. Of course, Moses hasn't seen it yet. Moses comes down the mountain. Can you imagine the pride? Not arrogant pride, just the pride of God to come down the mountain. I've got this amazing covenant with the only people on the earth that got chosen to do this. And he comes down there, and they have said, this is our God who brought us out of the land of Egypt. They have just taken another suzerain. They have violated. So when he breaks it, it's not so, he's very, very mad. I get that. But the breaking of the covenant is not so much just because he's mad and threw it down. The breaking of the covenant of the stones is because they broke the covenant. It's an illustration. Look here, I've got it in my hands. And I'm crashing. I mean, talk about a visual lesson. And they have already, now you can see why he made such a point of no other gods. And if you actually read through Deuteronomy, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, I didn't count this up because I didn't keep track of it. How many times did he say, no other gods, no other gods, no other gods? I would say he probably said it 50 to 100 times. No other gods. No, you can't have that God. Don't go after that God. Don't follow those guys because they will make you follow other gods. On and on and on and on and on. No other gods. You can see that they have a big problem figuring out it's monotheistic. They're having a big problem with it. So, he throws it down. And, then he melts he yells, he calls up Aaron, what are you doing? And Aaron goes, they just brought me their gold and I threw it all in the fire. Now came this God. And I'm going, oh, Aaron.
I know.
And then I think, how many times do I not have the same story, but how many times do I go, well, it's just because, it's really not my fault, it just sort of, Then so you can't really judge Aaron too much because it always points back. But anyway, it ends up that 3,000 men die that day, and when it says that they sat down to eat and they stood up to play, that is play the harlot. The way these gods were worshipped were usually with a orgy. That's how that is. So when they stand up to play and he sees the singing and the dancing, he's watching an orgy go on. That's how they worshipped those idols, which is another reason why. And later on it's going to say you cannot worship the idols with your female prostitutes, and you cannot worship the idols with your male prostitutes, and you cannot worship the idols with bestiality. Okay? So as soon as I see that, I go, oh, I get a picture of what's going on. And it's really serious. It's not, and that doesn't even include the burning of the children and the babies in the fire. There was even one idol I saw that was hollow, and the head was open, and a little hole, and the breast was open, and they would put the baby and let the baby drink from the idol while the fire went around. And I thought, Can you get more disgusting than that?
Wow.
So yes, when they talk about, that's the normal function of the land of Canaan. So when God goes, because it's been asked me over and over, how come God is so mean to just kill all the people in Canaan? Going, well, if you kind of knew how they lived, you might understand. So, yeah, anyway, I didn't mean to get so gross, but part of it gives us a reality of why. So, the people, Moses, God relents. He's going to, he wants to destroy the people. Moses sees it. He does do the intercession. He even offers Moses, I will make the whole promise out of your children and destroy them. See, he could keep the Abrahamic promise through Moses. But partially he couldn't because he's already promised Judah the kingship, which happens at the end of Genesis, and we're now in Exodus. So anyway, there's little odds and things here. But Moses turns it down. And he says, for the honor of your name, you cannot do that. Which I just think is really, really cool. And then here's, right between the golden calf and the covenant restored, is the time when Moses hides in the rock and he asks God to see his glory and all that. It's a really cool thing. It's in Exodus 23 or 22, right in that area. And by the time we get to 24, chapter 24, the people are going to agree to the covenant. Okay, so there's going to be one more thing. During that whole golden calf thing, the fire is still on the mountain. The smoke is still on the mountain. The fence around the mountain is still there, because if you touch it, you'll die. And they can't figure out what happened to Moses and their God. Just a little bit of that. So, all right, so Moses comes back down a second time. He's got the new covenant, the new tablets, and it says, Moses alone, however, shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come near. This is verse 2 of chapter 24. Then Moses, and this is verse 3, Moses came down and recounted to the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances, and all the people answered and said with one voice, all the words which the Lord has spoken we will do. So Moses wrote down the words of the Lord, and he arose early in the morning, and he built an altar at the foot of the mountain with the 12 pillars, ones for each of the tribes of Israel. And he sends the young men to get the animals for the sacrifice. And he, instead of dividing the animals on this side and dividing the animals on this side, he takes the blood of the animals and he puts half of it on the altar and half of it in bowls. Okay? And he read the book of the covenant, and he read it in the hearing of all the people. So now they're going over this again. This is official. The second time. This is what they say. We're down here. And in verse 7, all that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient. So they are officially signing the covenant again. And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant. This is it's just a different style of the ceremony. Instead of walking through it, they get sprinkled with it. For the longest time as a kid, I thought, that is the gooeyest, yuckiest thing ever. Don't sprinkle me with blood. I don't like that idea. You see what they're doing? He's going, what's happened to these animals will happen to you if you break this covenant. That's why they're sprinkled with the blood. And also, you can imagine how long it would take for 2 million people to walk through this. Anyway, so behold the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. Okay, then Moses takes Aaron and Nadab and Abihu, those are important names to remember in the future. And all the 70 leaders of the tribes up on the mount, and they have the celebration feast with the Lord. That goes there. Then he goes up, he sends them back down, he goes up, and he then from this point for the rest of the entire book of, well, no, all the way up to, oh, here, I've jumped around, excuse me. I meant to be up on chapter 34. You gotta forgive me, I missed the part. He was up there for 40 days, and as he's up there for 40 days, before the golden calf, he's getting all the instructions for the tabernacle. And then he comes down and he sees the golden calf. That's in 32. I got all my chapters mixed up. Sorry. And it's in 33 that he sees the glory of the Lord and he hides behind the rock. And in 34 they reestablish the covenant. And yes. And then he goes back up there for another 40 days. And he gets all the details again. And this time they stay faithful for 40 days. When he comes back down, they build the tabernacle. You ever notice that you have all the instructions for the tabernacle twice? You have it all the first time. This is what you're going to do. This is how to build it. It's a copy of the one in heaven. We find that out from Hebrews and Revelation, that every one of those parts is in heaven. And the second one is them doing it. You get to the end and they have the tabernacle all set up. Leviticus kind of happens simultaneous to this because then priests have to be prepared. They have to learn how to make the sacrifices. They have to go through the ratification ceremony for each priest to be their own priest. That's just a whole other topic. And then on the last day, on chapter 40 of Exodus, God moves in and the glory comes off the mountain and moves into the tabernacle. And now God is dwelling with his people. And it's a little bit of a reflection of Eden. Because here you have the people and God dwelling with them. And that's his plan. There's more to it. When we get to the end of the fort, it takes them 3 months to travel north to go ready to enter the land at Kadesh Barnea. They send in the 12 spies. 2 say yes, but 10 say no. Everybody listens to the no because majority's always right? And God said, okay, you can't go in, and they wander for 40 years. And then it's time to go in again, and so they do this they go around, they have to go around a different way. They go around the bottom of the Dead Sea, and they come up and they're at Moab, and they're standing there, and it's time, we're in the next generation, and it's time for the covenant to be repeated. Okay? The book of Deuteronomy, the vast majority of it happens in one day. You can imagine, you got all the people they're standing there. I get to see this mountain, only in the distance, but I got to see it. They're standing there on this mountain and they're looking over the land of Israel. And Moses isn't going to get to go in, but he's going to give them his last words. His last words are the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means, deuteros means twice. Onomos is law, the second time for the law, Deuteronomy. That's what the word means. And he starts off with a really long historical prologue and a long preamble. He's going to repeat the stipulations. Chapter 5 is the whole 10 Commandments all over again. They are going, he's just not going to give them this. They've already signed this. They don't get to agree or not agree. He's going to go over all these parts. He's going to do this. I tell you what he says. Then there's this list of the curses and the blessings. This is chapters 28, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, forgive me, I got all my chapters mixed up. And I know where I'm at. All right,
Deuteronomy 28.
Deuteronomy 28. There's a whole lot more in here if you want where the king has to do, write his thing, that's Deuteronomy 17. There's just stuff all over the place. There's stuff like Mark talked about Sunday, about the manna, that's chapter 8. There's over and over and over again, it says, I am the Lord your God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And you shall teach it to your children, and you shall write it on your houses, and you shall talk about it when you walk this way. And you talk, I mean, it's like, it is to pervade your life. Okay? And then, 28, if you follow the covenant, oh my goodness, your baking bowl will be blessed. Your cooking will be blessed. Your children blessed. You'll be blessed when you wash the clothes. You'll be blessed when you vacuum. You'll be blessed when you do every single thing. Every animal will be blessed. All your produce will be blessed. Your garden's going to grow like crazy. You're going to get rain when you need it. Your children will be blessed. It goes on. It's just like, whoa. Now that is some motivation. But if you decide not to, your bowl will not make good bread, and your vacuum cleaner will break, and your children will not be blessed, and your animals will not have good babies, and your garden will produce 20% instead of 100, and on, and the enemies will attack, and I will not protect you. It is straight up suzerain vassal thing. And I tell you what, there's more space on the curses than there is on the blessings, and I think we as humans need that. We need more warning than we need the blessings. That's quite something. We get down to the end, and finally Moses says, I know you guys are not going to do it, and this is what's going to happen to you, and eventually your suzerain is going to take your land, and you will be out of there, and you will be kicked out of the land. But your God will keep his promise to Abraham and the covenants that are unconditional, so you will have hope and you will get to come back. And Moses knows that whole story before he dies, just because he's looked at those people. He goes, I've been with you guys for 40 years. I know what you're like. So keeping and not keeping this covenant is the storyline of the rest of the Old Testament. And it is why we read and it says, and God was angry with them. Well, of course God's angry with them. And God blesses them because they were obedient. I mean, there was blessings that came through Josiah and Hezekiah. And they were completely protected from this enemy and that enemy. And then that enemy came in and completely wiped them out because they had idols all over the place. So you can see how the story totally defines the story of the rest of the Old Testament. We get down to the very end of the Old Testament. And it's like the people are exhausted. I mean, I look at it and I thought, if I was the whole people group and I'm following the story, I'm trying to obey, I never do. Every generation doesn't obey. Every person of every generation breaks the covenant. Nobody can do the covenant. And you get down to the end of Malachi, and it ends with, you're on a curse. So my question always was, God, you knew they weren't going to keep the covenant before you wrote the covenant. Why did you do the covenant? And it's God, right? You know he's not, you know. So here the covenant is, God is so holy. My people, I'm going to make you, remember at the very beginning, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, right? It's full of these curses and on and on. They can't do it. 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 It's almost like, okay, I'm exhausted. I give up. God goes, good. Now I can redeem you. That's why it ends in a curse, so that they are ready for John the Baptist to come in and say, repent, your Redeemer's coming. Because in the meantime, I can do it. I can do it. We can do it. You watch, God. We'll do it. We can do it with other gods. You watch. We can do it. And that's sort of the story of the whole human race. So why is there such a big Old Testament? We are slow learners. And God needed all this time to set up what's coming. So as of next week, we will go back to Genesis. I've set you up as best I can. We've covered how the books are outlined. We've covered why we need redemption in the first place because of the fall in Genesis. We've covered a lot of the culture of the land and how they think. And we've covered the main standard for what's happening. So as of next week, we'll start going through the storyline and seeing how it happens. So if you want to read on next week, you could read Genesis 6 through 9. That's Noah. There's a covenant in there. You could read the rest of the book of Genesis. I know you won't have time for that, but you could read parts of that. If you want to read some cool parts, you can read 19 and 20. That's when Abraham gets Isaac and sacrifices Isaac. I got it wrong again, 21 and 22. And Mark talked about Joseph a couple weeks ago, so I might not do too much on Joseph. So that's where we are next week.
So you said 21, 22, but what was the first one?
6 through 9.
Or the whole?
Or the whole book if you want to. Or if you want to do something really interesting, read Deuteronomy. I mean, that defines the whole Old Testament for me, is Deuteronomy. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for being our suzerain. Thank you for making it a new covenant with Jesus who solves the vassal issue that we can't do for us. He is the perfect fulfillment of it. He's the perfect keeper of it. He perfectly keeps, and then he gives that to us. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the patience to spend an entire Old Testament to teach us how much we need you, and help us to have that fear and awe of you as if we were looking at you on that mountain and hearing your voice. In Jesus' name, amen.